And now I'm back to read part 2 of the evolution and the illusion of randomness. Letting the reality of the organism speak. But while questions such as these do point to an extraordinary slipperiness in the remarks of Dawkins and Dennett, I do not intend to persuade the endless argument or pursue the endless argument to which they would doubtless lead. There is a more fruitful way to assess the claims of mindless mechanism and illusion, and that is simply by comparing them to living creatures, especially at the molecular level, so that so impresses these writers as being both fundamental and rooted in meaninglessness. Dennett's contention that through the microscope we witness the birth of agency in the first macromolecules that have enough complexity to do things is an illusion, is itself an illusion. Neither he nor anyone else has ever witnessed the birth of such agency through a microscope or any other instrument, a fact that many decades of unrestrained speculation about the creation of life some billions of years ago does nothing to change. What we see through the microscope is what we see with our unaided eyes. Life comes to life. Living cells, with all their displays of agency, come from other living cells. Open any journal of any sub-discipline of biology, and you will immediately be overwhelmed by suggestions of agency, even at the lowest levels. Molecules, we are told to a fault, are bent on regulating, signaling, stimulating, responding, controlling, assisting, suppressing, healing, repairing, sensing, coordinating, and all in a way that can be understood only contextually. There is nothing at any level of observation, whether above or below macro molecules, that is not caught up in the meaning of life as an organism of the organism as a whole. Living agency is, if nothing, if anything, goodness. Living agency, if anything, even more vivid when we shift our attention to evolution and consider what passes from one generation to the next. For example, through simple cell division and mitosis, the process of almost unfathomable complexity, or through the even more elaborately orchestrated fugue we know as meiosis, whatever that is, in sexual reproduction. In the latter case, everything comes to an intense focus in the sublime performance that one pair of authors describes as chromosome choreography. There's that word again. The meiotic ballet. Maybe I got it that time. Nowhere does the cell seem more intent on moving towards a definite end than intricately. I might have to start this one over. These words are really starting to bend my brain. Nowhere does the cell seem more intent on moving forward toward. Nowhere does the cell seem more intent on moving toward a definite end than in the I knew I was going to screw this word up. I know it's intricate. Intricately coordinated steps of this ballet. If I cared enough to edit, I would edit all of my mistakes out, but I'm not going to do that. Intricately coordinated steps of this ballet. And so a path is prepared from one generation to the next. Life engenders life. This unbroken thread of life explains why we encounter the language of meaning and purpose that the biologist breathes into every description of every organism. Everything characteristic of the organism, from its behavior as a whole down to the performance of its various organs, all the way to the micro world of interwoven molecular processes in the cell. That is, everything distinctively biological as opposed to merely physical and chemical. can only be described, and always is described, in a language of coordinated processes, governing norms and means brought into the service of ends. We are never talking merely about physical and chemical interactions, but rather about processes continually shifting, transforming, and adjusting themselves in relation to their context in order to go somewhere, if only to hold themselves within reasonable distance of some particular state, as when warm blooded creatures maintain their internal temperature within a certain range. And this kind of going or maintaining ceases upon death, when everything takes on an entirely different non living character. Such then is the living reality that Dawkins refers to as the appearance of design, or the illusion of design and planning. It is also what Dennett has in mind when he writes, all the design in the universe can be explained as the product of a process that is ultimately bereft of intelligence. In other words, an algorithmic process that weds randomness and selection to produce all the intelligence that exists. Dawkins and Dennett sometimes seem fixated upon design, presumably as a result of their severely constraining preoccupation with religion and the creationism or intelligent design promulgated promulgated created by some religious folks. Although the world has its legitimate uses, you will not find me speaking of design simply because, as I've made abundantly clear in my previous articles, organisms cannot be understood as having been designed machine-like, rather by an engineer god or a blind watchmaker elevated to god-like status. The organisms participate in a higher life. It is a participation that works from within at a deeper level. The ancients recognized as that of the logos, informing all things. It is a sharing of the springs of life and being, not a mere receptivity to some sort of external mechanical tinkering modeled anthropocentrically on human engineering. Dawkins and Dennett's stance is bizarre, above all because everything in the drama of evolution presupposes the meaning-soaked activity of the organisms whose meaning is said to be explained that way. The organism reproduces itself by bringing all its choreographic powers of organization, coordination, and integration to bear upon the reproductive process. Only so do we have a passage from one generation to another. And only so does natural selection, which itself involves nothing other than a living and intensely directed engagement of organisms with each other in an environmental, partly of their own making, gain material to work on. Where then do we find dumb, lifeless mechanisms blindly engendering new life forms? Where do we see anything other than the elaborate, interwoven, overwhelmingly meaningful activity of living beings playing out at every level, from the molecular to the ecological? That's part 2. And I'll be back for part 3 later.